action. There you go.
Hello, everybody. It's a really great pleasure to be with you. And I want to thank Debbie Feldman and Donna Litke, and also Great Neck Library for inviting me to share this subject that I feel a deeply personal connection to and that I have a lot of passion about, Verismo Opera. Today I'm going to start out just explaining why I offer this talk on Verismo. There are scholars, and some of them are friends of mine, who have delved further into the musicological importance and historical importance of this distinctive form of opera. And we'll get to some of that. But I'm here today as someone who has been fortunate enough to perform some of this music. And as one who fell in love with it as a teenager, not as a listener, but as a participant in productions by a very modest community theater company in Trenton, New Jersey, called the Artist Showcase Theater. The Artist Showcase Theater was owned by a husband and wife team of voice teachers, Tina and Byron Steele. And I studied voice with Tina. I called her Mrs. Steele. This little theater was a funny, charming place, and where the Steeles gave their students the opportunity to perform in fully staged productions of musicals and operas with piano accompaniment. I began voice lessons with Mrs. Steele when I was 13, and not long after that, she had me sing in various choruses at the Artist Showcase Theater. And I fell in love with it. I loved it. The costumes and makeup and the sense of community was something I had never experienced before, and a sense of belonging also. So eventually, Mrs. Steele cast me in lighter roles like Adele in Die Fledermaus and Norina in Don Pasquale. And I continued to also to sing in the choruses of other shows. And one of those shows was La Boheme. So being in my early teens, I needed to be driven to and from rehearsals. And most of the other singers I was performing with were in their 20s or older. I became good friends with two women in their early 20s, and one was singing Mimi, and one was singing Musetta in La Boheme. So even though I was in the chorus, since my carpool friends were female leads, they were my carpool friends, by the way, I got to stay for entire rehearsals. So night after night, I got to watch how this opera, La Boheme, was put together. And I fell in love with La Boheme and Puccini. As a young person, I had studied piano for 7 years up to that point, but I'd had a limited exposure to opera. As someone who was artistic and who dreamed of going to Paris, maybe living in Paris one day, La Boheme was a revelation. I saw myself in the characters, and I was swept away by the musical language of the composer. Best of all, the following year, I got to sing Musetta. But before there was a La Boheme, and before there was an operatic style called Verismo, there were creative and forward-thinking minds who blazed a trail. As is often the case with art, literature leads the way. And that's what we have also with Verismo. Its precursor was called literary naturalism, which approached storytelling in a more immediate, almost journalistic way, concentrating on the lives of more or less regular folks, rather than gods or nobility. There was an arresting grittiness not seen before. French writer Émile Zola is among the most notable of the authors who pioneered this kind of storytelling. So at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, as the industrial age claims its place, there is a turning away from old constructs and a push toward modernism, which acknowledges and even elevates at times the voices and circumstances of everyday people and the downtrodden. There's a deeper examination of morality and mores and all that makes people tick. There's a directness of expression that is prized. Along with this, the landscape of art music was staggeringly varied and increasingly adventurous, with chromaticism coming out of romanticism, pushing harmonic and structural boundaries, program music that was illustrative, such as the tone poems by Richard Strauss, And at times also they were psychological in subject matter. And there's Impressionism with its shifting tonalities, a very exciting time. Up to that point, opera plots had primarily revolved around nobility and or gods in one way or another. But we do find aspects of Verismo surfacing in opera as early as 1851 in Verdi's Rigoletto, which is based on a play by Victor Hugo, Le Roi s'amuse, the king amuses himself, with libretto by Francesco Maria Piave. According to the Simon & Schuster book of the opera, Verdi, when composing Rigoletto, took much greater care in considering the individual, the protagonist, and his psychology. Quote, whose dramatic situation becomes the true unifying thread holding the action together. This attention to a character's psychology is a move toward modernism and is one of the key components of Verismo. For the purposes of my talk, I'm going to concentrate on a single scene in this great opera. It's a duet between Rigoletto and an assassin named Sparafucile. This 4.5-minute piece feels downright revolutionary to me. First of all, it's only 4.5 minutes, but it packs such a punch. In those 4.5 minutes, everything changes for Rigoletto. He sees a possible way out of a miserable life, both for him and his daughter. There is no bombast. It is quite simply a conversation between two men, two individuals on the fringes of society. Rigoletto, who is only granted his position of jester in the court because of a physical deformity that happens to accompany a sharp wit. And an assassin who is unrepentant. So we have an exploited person and an assassin whose dialogue is accompanied by this strangely lilting and rather hushed, almost chamber-like orchestration. It lends itself vividly to a foreboding atmosphere. There's so much spaciousness in the music and yet great economy of musical material. It's just 4.5 minutes. And there's plenty of room for what actors call subtext, which is the deeper psychological workings of a character's mind and actions. So note at the beginning, I'm going to play that very shortly. Note at the beginning of the scene that the melody, which feels archly unassuming, is not a vocal line, is not in the vocal line, but it's in the strings. And now the screen sharing part of our entertainment. Okay, let's see what we get. Is it sharing? No, share. All right. Go. Okay. All right, let's see. Stop. Okay, so there was my first technical glitch, was that I was supposed to show that version with subtitles and I didn't. So sorry about that. But Sparafucile is the assassin. He sees Rigoletto. He kind of knows where Rigoletto lives. There's a woman in that house. Sparafucile doesn't realize, of course, it's Rigoletto's, who it is to Rigoletto, thinks it's his mistress. Knows how the Duke likes to mess around with women, and offers his services to take care of anybody who might be getting in Rigoletto's way. What I want to say is that is a 1982 film directed by Jean-Pierre Panel, and the Rigoletto is sung by Ingvar Wixel, and Sparafucile is Ferruccio Furlanetto, and Riccardo Chailly is conducting the Vienna Philharmonic. I should also just give a little background. Rigoletto is the jester in the Duke's court, and one of his duties also is to procure women with whom the Duke can amuse himself. The women are then considered dishonored, as are their families. And at that moment, right before, I was supposed to say this before that video, but right before what happens there is a man, an older man, Count Monterone, whose daughter was one of the Duke's conquests, is being taken to an execution for speaking out against the Duke. And as he passes Rigoletto, he curses him. Rigoletto is the first of what is referred to as Verdi's popular trio, the other two of which are Il Trovatore and the next opera on our Verismo tour, La Traviata, based on Dame aux Camélias, a novel by Alexandre Dumas fils, with the libretto also by Piave. La Traviata, the fallen woman, stands as further prototype for Verismo. The characters are contemporary with the time in which the piece was written, 1853. The title character is not nobility, but rather a woman trying to make her way in the world, whose reality is harsh in many ways. If we turn to literature and historical study, we know that a single woman's choices in life were extremely limited in 1853. As in Rigoletto, the psychology of the title character is, again, that unifying thread holding the action together. Violetta Valerie is a well-known courtesan in Paris. At a grand party in her home, she meets Alfredo Germont, who in a moment alone with Violetta professes his love for her. She dismisses him at first, but then allows herself to take him more seriously. Giving him a camellia, she tells him that they will see each other again when the flower has faded, meaning they'll meet the next day. It's important to note that Violetta is suffering from consumption, as happens with many opera heroines, and as happened with many people also in those days. The party ends and Violetta is alone in her lavish dwelling. In her famous first act Arya, we experience the librettist's and composer's further exploration of the character's psychology. Musing over the events of the evening, she wonders if a woman like her could actually have a relationship based on mutual love and respect. What an antidote to the empty frenzy of her current life that would be. She allows herself to indulge this dream for a time. In the end, though, Violetta resigns herself to her perceived station in life. The last section of the aria sounds happy, but what is fueling it or underscoring it is the character's sense of rage and sorrow, resignation and desperation. She sees no other choice for herself but to pursue a pretense of joy in hedonism. That's her place in the world. However, at the beginning of Act 2, we see that she has boldly chosen love. Violetta and Alfredo are living together in her country home. When Alfredo finds out that Violetta is selling her property in order for them to sustain their lifestyle in the country, he decides to go to Paris to see about other financial options. While Alfredo is gone, his father, Giorgio Germont, comes to see Violetta, asking that she end her relationship with his son because as an affront to polite society, it's a threat to his daughter's upcoming marriage as well as his son's social standing. As Violetta concedes to his request, Germont comes to understand that the woman truly loves his son. In this sublime duet, both characters' points of view are offered without either one being depicted as overtly wrong or villainous. The complexity of the situation is fully evident, with both Violetta and Germont sharing mutual sympathy, which makes the duet all the more stirring. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of music possibly ever written. And I'm sorry that we can't listen to it or see it today because of the time constraints, but I encourage people to listen to it at some point when you have free time. Violetta has one request of Germont, that when she has died, he should tell Alfredo of her sacrifice. Germont doesn't realize that the woman is ill, but Violetta is quite certain that she will not live another year, especially if it must be without Alfredo. Of course, she does see Alfredo again at a party where they have a contentious encounter rife with misunderstanding and frustration, the outcome of which is a duel between Alfredo and Violetta's escort for that evening. Both men luckily survive. And then again, she sees him in Act 3 when she is near death. Germont, recognizing the scope of his son's pain and separation from Violetta, has told Alfredo about the agreement he'd made with Violetta and her sacrifice. Alfredo comes to her and they're able to share her last moments together. The realistic handling of the situation is, again, this portends or is a forward-thinking kind of vehicle in drama and in opera, especially at this time. Before we move on to Cavalleria Rusticana, as we chug along on our little trip that must cover a lot of area, I have to give a reverent nod to Georges Bizet's Carmen. Here's a story about gritty, swarthy people and their very earthy passions. The opera, based on an 1845 novella of the same name by Prosper Mérimée, premiered in 1875, the same year as Bizet's death. The aspects of local color and even more defined directness of expression mark a greater leap toward modernism and artistic realism, paving the way for Cavalleria Rusticana. Cavalleria Rusticana, Rustic Chivalry, by Pietro Mascagni, had its premiere in 1890 with libretto by Giovanni Targioni Tozzetti and Guido Menasci. The opera is based on a short story with the same title, written in 1880 by Sicilian writer Giovanni Verga. Now, I'd like to share a quote that perfectly sums up the impact of Verga's story. This is from the book Puccini Without Excuses, a refreshing reassessment of the world's most popular composer, by author, radio commentator, and my friend, William Berger. Some of you may have heard Will on the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts, or you will if you tune in the future. This is but one of his books. I'm going to show it to you. It's a great, not just a resource, it's very fun as well and informative, just like Will. And it offers this observation about Verga's work, quote, "It's 4 pages of direct, unadulterated prose slapped readers across the face with its simple tale of jealousy and passion in a Sicilian village," unquote. With Verga's innovative and uncompromising approach to storytelling, the literary style of Verismo came into full flower. Mascagni was drawn to Verga's story when he saw a call for submissions to a competition for young Italian composers. He worked on the piece and finished it within 2 months, submitting it on the last day for entries. And yes, he was one of 3 winners, which meant his opera would receive a performance in Rome. An instant sensation, Cavalleria received 60 curtain calls at its premiere. According to the Simon & Schuster Book of the Opera, quote, "Cavalleria Rusticana, born under the sign of realism, came to be considered a manifesto of musical Verismo." The plot is relatively straightforward. The story unfolds within the span of 1 day, Easter Day. Turiddu, who has been betrothed to Lola, has returned from military service to find that Lola is now married to Silvio. On the rebound, he becomes involved with another woman in the town, Santuzza, but he is still in love with Lola, and they begin an affair. Moreover, Turiddu has made it clear to Santuzza he wants no more to do with her. She, however, has not accepted this. Early in the opera, Santuzza says that she is excommunicated and cannot enter the homes of other townspeople, nor can she enter the church. In this opera, the church is often the centerpiece of the stage set and action. As churches are so often part of the piazze or town squares in Italy, this is a very real depiction. And it's also an effective vehicle through which a lot of local color and dramatic tension can be presented. Amid the Easter festivities, Santuzza confronts Turiddu about leaving her for Lola. As their argument reaches a pitch, it says in the stage directions that he throws her to the ground. She curses him as he storms off into the church. Just then, Santuzza encounters Silvio and is compelled to tell him about his wife's betrayal. Silvio swears vengeance. He challenges Turiddu to a duel, which Turiddu accepts, and Turiddu is killed. When we performed Cavalleria at the Artist Showcase Theater, I was in the chorus, and then I was thrilled that I was asked to be one of the women that screams, "Turiddu has been murdered!" So that was like a really jazzed me up when I got to do that, because that was fun. Probably what was like one of my first lines in an opera. So, as any opera lover knows, Cavalleria is most often paired with I Pagliacci by Ruggero Leoncavallo. Pagliacci are clowns in the Commedia dell'arte style, and that's kind of why I wore my Arlecchino pattern. Pagliaccio is the Italian version of Pierrot. Leoncavallo wrote the libretto himself, and he always maintained that the story was based on a case in Calabria that his father had presided over as a judge. The opera was a hit right from the start when it premiered in 1892 with the great Toscanini conducting. Today, with our time constraints, I can't, again, share everything I'd like to. So I decided on the prologue and some of what follows. I chose this example because it distinctly highlights the sensibility of Verismo. The words in the prologue are practically a mission statement. This is a 1982 film directed by Franco Zeffirelli, the orchestra and choir of La Scala, conducted by Georges Prêtre, Placido Domingo as Canio, Juan Pons as Tonio, Teresa Stratas as Nedda, and Florindo Andreoli as Pepe. And we will go to the next share screen experiment. Here we go. Boop, boop. Get rid of this and play that.
Scusatemi se da sol mi presento, io sono il prologo, poiché c'erano ancora le antiche maschere e l'autore in parte vuol riprendere le vecchie usanze. Ma non per dirvi come pria, le lacrime che noi versiamo son false, degli spasimi e dei nostri martir, non allarmatevi. No, l'autore ha cercato invece fingervi uno sguardo di vita. Egli per massima sol per artista è un uomo, e che per uomini scrive in umile buon servitore. Vedrete le spalle del bravo pagliaccio, e come si vendete un bellaccio. Vedrete di cogno tremar la carcassa, e quale matassa d'infiglior dia. Venite onorate qui, gioia di signore, a 23 ore.
All right. That makes me want to see the whole thing, right? So what I should say though is for the purposes of the film, Zeffirelli updated the time to the 30s, which I think still gives, it still feels as authentic as anything. To give a little more, to go on with the story as the opera continues, Canio, the leader of the troupe, that's Placido Domingo, joins some town folks who have invited him to the tavern for a drink. When he's gone, his wife Nedda, also one of the actors, has a run-in with another in the troupe, Tonio, who delivered the prologue. He declares his love for her, but she rebuffs him. Angered, Tonio's behavior turns physically threatening. Nedda finds a weapon, it's often a whip or a knife, and wards him off. Enter Silvio, no relation to Silvio and Cavalleria, I suppose. That would be interesting if they tried that though. With whom Nedda is having an affair. At Silvio's impassioned entreaty, Nedda agrees to elope with him after the show that night. The brief but ardent tete-a-tete is overheard by Tonio, who then decides to go to the tavern and tell Canio what's going on. At this point comes the great tenor aria, Vestila giubba, or put on the costume. Canio, racked with sorrow, begins to dress for the upcoming performance. He says to himself, "Are you a man? You're a clown. Tu sei pagliaccio. Turn the spasms and tears into jokes. Laugh at the sorrow that poisons your heart." That ends part one. And again, the torment, the psychology is very evident in the words and the music. Except for a few final lines, the entire second part is the play. So the play within the play, within the play. Pagliaccio is played by Canio, and he's being cuckolded, much like what's happening in real life, but in this case, it's a little more, it's absurd and comedic, by his wife Colombina, who's played by Nedda. When Canio, tormented as he is, makes his entrance as Pagliaccio, the lines between reality and fantasy have begun to blur. He abandons the script and begins to ask Nedda the name of her lover. At one point, the chorus remarks on how sad it is and how true to life it all seems. Becoming more and more unhinged, Canio presses Nedda for the name while she makes a feeble attempt to continue with the play as it's supposed to be. Pepe, watching from the wings, tries to get Tonio to help him intervene, but Tonio shrugs it off. He knows that he can have some revenge now. Finally, a raving Canio draws a knife and stabs Nedda, who calls out Silvio's name. As Silvio runs to Nedda's aid, Canio stabs him. And as many here today know, he exclaims the opera's iconic last line, spoken, not sung. La commedia è finita. The comedy is over. It's such a great piece. I just feel like a fangirl. I just want to be like about it. But now we move to our final stop on today's Verismo tour, La Boheme. Based on a work by Henri Mergier, Scène de la vie bohème, with the libretto by Luigi Illica and Giuseppe Giacosa. It's well documented that Puccini practically tortured his librettists while writing La Boheme. He was exceedingly particular about the marriage of text and music, demanding rewrite after rewrite until he felt the music and text were seamlessly enmeshed. At times, he would work on the opera in the midst of card games and rowdy drinking with friends. He'd join the carousing, then go to a nearby piano and compose, and then return to the party. However unorthodox his methods, they certainly worked. Although at its premiere, conducted again by Toscanini, reviews were mixed. It seems that this new approach to opera, with its frank and immediate look at life, was just a bit off the beaten path for opera lovers at the time. However, as we know, it came to be embraced and has endured as a prime example of the best of what the operatic repertoire holds. I have another quote from William Berger's book, offering further explanation for La Boheme's rocky initial reception. Quote, La Boheme is definitely Verismo, but it does not work in the same way. It is not about emotionally extroverted peasants in those places over there where they act weird, Sicily and Calabria respectively. It is about modern urban people of no particular distinction whatsoever, who have real emotions about events and situations any one of us could recognize. There are no knives drawn in Boheme. There is no code of honor, and there is no exoticism. It was about the audience, as it still is. This may seem mundane now. It was a lot to comprehend in 1896. One of the aspects of this opera that is so striking to me is the way Puccini and his librettists deftly handled the juxtapositions between humor, tragedy, romance, and fearfulness, which can disguise itself as rage. It can sound trite to say we laugh, we cry, we love, we lose, we mourn, we go on. But that is the flow of life, and all of it exists vibrantly within the notes of this masterful work. We vividly experience the complexity of these people. None of the 6 leading characters are only comedic or only tragic. They are all painted with a full palette of color. Their difficulties are born of situations that do not present easy solutions, which we'll see exquisitely depicted in the example from Act 3 that is coming up in a bit. So I'll set up now we're going to have a sequence of some watching. So we get a lot of music to hear now. The characters I'll set up for you. Marcello is a painter. Rodolfo is a poet and playwright. Chenard is a musician. Collina is a philosopher. Mimi is their neighbor who embroiders. Conceivably, she sells her crafts, but also at times keeps company with men of means, and by the way, is also consumptive. Musetta is apparently something of a singer. She also keeps company at times with wealthy older men. Once again, we have a reminder of the limited choices available to women trying to have independent lives or somewhat independent lives during that time in history. And Musetta and Marcello have a past. They're kind of on again, off again. Act 1 is a mixture of moods, but nothing too heavy. It's Christmas Eve in Paris. We meet the 4 friends as they're trying to stretch the little resources they possess. With fuel running low in the stove, Rodolfo decides to burn his new play. He and Marcello exchange good-natured jokes about it. Another friend, Chenard the musician, returns home from working for a wealthy man, and he has brought money and food and wood for the stove. The Collina also returns, and they all rejoice at their good fortune and agree they should have a dinner out on Christmas Eve. Then there's a knock at the door, and it's the landlord who's come for the overdue rent. And that's our next video. All right. Video.
Che fate? No! Queste cibarie sono a salveria. Poi di
Sorry. Sorry, we'll go back to that. I wanted to set that up a little so you recognize who is who. And also the cast. This is a Royal Opera House production from 2017, directed by Richard Jones. The conductor is Antonio Pappano. Michael Fabiano is singing Rodolfo. Marcello is a Polish baritone, and I have to, Mariusz Kwiecien, I looked up how to actually pronounce his name. Florian Sempe is Chouinard. Luca Titoto is Colina, and Jeremy White is Benoit. And for the purposes of recognizing who's who, since you don't see it from the very beginning, well, Rodolfo is the tenor. Marcello has short hair, Chouinard is wearing the cape with the vest, and Colina is very scruffy with a full beard. Okay, and we'll resume.
In casa il dì della vigilia, mentre i quartier latino le sue vie, adoppa di salsicce e cornie. Quando un olenzo di frittelle impazza le vecchie strade, le ragazze cantano contente la vigilia di Natale con una mussette. Religione, o miei signori, si beva in casa, ma si pranzi fuori. Affitto! Date una sveglia! Presto! Non occorre, vorrei secca! Va bene! Accendiamo! Prepariamo! Questo è l'ultimo trimestre! Non piacere! E qui ancora un salso! Accettiamo! Alla sua salute! A lei vedendo perché in trimestre scorso mi promise. Promise non mantengo. Che fai? Sei pazzo? Ha visto? Resti un momento in nostra compagnia. Dita quant'annia. Caro signor Benoit, gli anni per carità. Su e giù magra, proprio magra, da poi no. Le donne magre son grandacapi e spesso sopra capi e son piedi d'oie per esempio. Mia
I love the depiction of their shenanigans. That's something that I remember thinking when I first saw the rehearsals, how amazing this was, that this composer took the time to write that, and how realistic to me it seems. So they get rid of the landlord and they make themselves, and they get ready for their night out. Rodolfo says he wants to stay and do some writing, and he'll catch up with them. While he's writing or struggling for inspiration, there is another knock at the door, and this time it is the neighbor Mimi, whose candle has gone out in the stairwell. Mimi and Rodolfo have an immediate mutual attraction. While sharing a little bit about themselves, Marcello, Collina, and Chonard call to Rodolfo from the street because they're waiting for him. Rodolfo is torn, but then Mimi asks if she might join in the dinner plans, and Rodolfo, utterly smitten, cannot refuse. And we'll have another moment from the opera. Let's see. That one, this one. Same company as before.
E al ritorno, curioso, dammi l'abbraccio mia piccina. Obbedisco, signor.
Okay. Oh, who's playing that? What happened? Sorry. Oh, Lord. Whoops. There we go. Oh, okay. Not bad. All right. I have to say also that Nicole Carr was singing Mimi there, joining the cast. So that's the end of Act 1. In Act 2, it takes place entirely at the Café Momus in the street scene, Christmas Eve in Paris. The eateries, markets, street vendors are bustling with revelers and last-minute shoppers. It's pure joy, that act. But by Act 3, we're in the dead of winter, and the sweetness between Rodolfo and Mimi has soured. And we'll show a video, which is a 2008 film directed by Robert Dornhelm, with Anna Netrebko as Mimi, Rolando Villason as Rodolfo, and George von Bergen as Marcello. And is the Symphony Orchestra der Bayerischen Rundfunks, conducted by Bertrand de Billy. Musetta insegna il
uscite me ne venga questa volta. Si desta, salta, mi cerca, viene, non mi vedo, corri in casate, per carità, pensate scene qua. Non c'è la fine niente, non ci sente. Io voglio separarmi da di te. Un'altra volta credetti, volta mio cuore. Dico gli occhi azzurri allo splendore, e il senso il impegno da sole, il suonerò, per sempre al mio dentro. Nei pozzi l'amor dentro, lacrime di stima, se non vidi le stamilla, l'amore sia col fuoco. Tu sei gelosa, un poco, collerica, lunatico, i becco di pregiudizi, noioso, consulto!
Okay. I'm like, whoa. He goes on, they stop the scene before he finishes. He goes on to say that because they live in such squalid conditions, it's cold in the apartment and her health is getting worse and worse and he just can't bear it. And this to me is so, the conversation is so human. It's just summing up so much about what people really do. They pretend something, they're angry about something, but what they really are is afraid and in pain. And they can't face what's going on. So once they've come to this point, Mimi and Rodolfo air their feelings at this point, and they actually decide that they can't separate yet. They say they'll stay together until the spring. In Act 4, some months have passed, and Mimi and Mosetta have gone, both of them have gone their own ways. Rodolfo and Marcello are pining, and they're joined by Colina and Chenard once again. The shenanigans ensue between the four friends. In the middle of their horseplay, Musetta enters without knocking. She has brought a weak and ailing Mimi to be with Rodolfo. everyone does something caring in this act, from Musetta selling her earrings in order to get some medication and a little gift for Mimi, and Colina selling his prized coat to help with further expenses. They all show the best of humanity. They're all there for their friend, Rodolfo, who, and just at the moment when Mimi can no longer persist in her battle for life. This just resonates with me in some ways from some recent things that have happened, so forgive me for that. We'll watch the last 5 minutes, which maybe I'll be gone when you come back. But they'll speak for themselves anyway. The last 5 minutes with the full awareness, let's keep a full awareness of the depth of each character as they are so very present for each other in sharing a devastating personal tragedy. And when I speak of the characters, I'm also speaking about the music, which is at the same time breathtakingly heartrending and beautiful. Let's see, another screen share. And I have to move my toolbar, excuse me.
Che ha detto il medico? Verrà.
Madonna benedetta, fate la grazia a questa poveretta che non debba morire. Qui ci vuole un riparo perché la fiamma sventola. E che possa guarire, Madonna Santa, io sono in me.
spero ancora, vi pare che sia grave.
Non credo.
Marcello, Vestilata! Zetta, a voi. Come va? Vedi? È tranquilla. Che vuol dire? Quell'andare e venire? Quel guardarmi? Così?
Okay. Joining the cast there was as Musetta was Simona Mihai. I think we all can understand a lot about Verismo today and the impact of it and why it has such a timeless quality. And it's just every time I'm like, yep, that's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. So thank you so much for sharing this time with me. And I'd like to thank Donna Litke again and Debbie Feldman and Great Neck Public Library for allowing me, inviting me to share this really special music with you, special art with you. And so then once again, if you're curious about Puccini in particular, but it covers, of course, other people come up, as we know. This is Will Berger's book, and it's great. So maybe you want to check that out. Puccini Without Excuses, a refreshing reassessment of the world's most popular composer by William Berger. And we have just a few minutes if any people have questions, and I'm not sure how to do this part, Donna.
Yeah, let's see. So you have a couple of thank yous I want to read.
Thank you.
From Tricia Gallagher, thank you, Maria, always so informative and insightful. From Abby, thank you, it was a wonderful program. From Jeffrey,
Yeah.
Bravissima Maria, Lillian, very verified, a great job. Stephen Miller, thank you, Maria, this was great. We'll be doing his own live event.
No, it's okay. You don't have to read them all.
Okay.
But thanks. So I don't know if anyone has any more to add. I know we have to turn over the guard here at the house for my husband to teach at 3:30 we have to make sure we have the changing of the guard. So we do have those like a few minutes if anybody has anything they want to say about it. But I know we covered a lot, and it was also an emotional journey as well.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Maria. Yeah.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to ask Maria a question, you can unmute yourself. I believe. Yep, you should be able to do this.
Maria, it's so nice to talk to you after all these years. I'm not going to say how many. I'll be discreet. But one of the questions that came up when Verismo first started, and which may still be valid today, is that a lot of singers who are used to the Mozart operas where there were beautiful ABA arias that were all beautiful music, they didn't think that what they were doing in Verismo was actually singing. And many opera stars refused to do Verismo because they thought, I don't get to stand in the middle of the stage and do the, is there,
That's right, yeah.
do you see a point to that attitude, or?
Oh, well, just a resistance to change, I think, is the point. I mean, I haven't gone and looked at that as much because I related to this form of opera earlier, really, than any of the others that I came to know. Even though I had actually, done some of the bel canto repertoire, but for me, I was like, this was a kind of storytelling that immediately, as a teenager, just grabbed me. So then. Yeah, I mean, I think it had a little bit to do with the egos and the sense that this was just a big change. And there was different things now were being demanded of performers.
Do you think it's more drama and less music in Verismo?
Not less music.
More same music and more drama.
Different. It's different drama. It's trying to embrace a naturalism, just like with the as like the literary naturalism. I think it's trying to be more naturalistic with the way people communicate with each other, and the way emotions, the sort of trajectory of emotions, and where so that there's more movement in a sense. I would say, but we could talk about that some more together too.
Okay. I hope we will have a chance to.
Yeah, it's nice to see you, Gary. Anyone else? Okay. All right.
Well.
Okay.
Does this person have a question?
No, I think people just are unmuted a little.
Just sit down, yeah.
I will look at the comments, and I thank everyone for your comments and your graciousness and the time you spent with me. And Donna, again.
Oh, Maria, thank you. Thank you.
I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Maria. It was wonderful. Just wonderful. And boy, I'm going to ask you, if I was to listen to La Boheme, I can only do it in a movie. What would you recommend? Because that scene.
Oh, yeah. I recommend that Royal Opera House video with the subtitles. I see I had another one get in there without subtitles, but with the subtitles, I really think that production is wonderful. I really think it captures the spirit of the piece and of Verismo.
Yeah.
The act, everything is impeccable in that. The acting. The one thing I don't love is that they don't have some sort of bed for her. I find that makes the staging a little awkward. Gary's like, yeah, I found that a little bit weird because it does draw attention to itself rather than allowing it to be about the character. And other than that, I really recommend that. And I loved the other film that I showed with Anna Netrebko. And there's one of my personal favorites I'll talk to you about later, was a Zeffirelli 1981 production at the Met, but I couldn't find videos with subtitles. Yeah. And I only have a VHS of that, and I need to get a DVD apparently. So
the whole opera on YouTube or no?
Yes. The whole
you can.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk. I could send you the links actually if you want.
Yeah.
So, all righty.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Donna. You are awesome and amazing. And
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Bye-bye.